Welcome back to More Politics. Now, it is a chilling message from a missing and possibly murdered journalist. The Washington Post today published the last piece written by Jamal Khashoggi since the Saudi journalist and dissident disappeared 2 weeks ago in Istanbul. Alex Morgan and our team in the Cube in Lyon have more on this story. Alex?
Tessa, the headline in Jamal Khashoggi's last piece: what the Arab world needs most, free expression. This was in the piece he wrote shortly before disappearing inside the Saudi consulate in Turkey on the 2nd of October. And it underscores what his editor says is his desire for freedom right across the Arab world, a call, a rallying cry for a free press and free individuals. Well, let me just bring you up a tweet from his editor, Karen Attia. She says, "They may have silenced my friend, but they cannot kill his words." At the top of the article, in a short paragraph, she says, the Post held off publishing this article for a while in the hope that Jamal Khashoggi would return and they'd be able to edit it together. She says now she's accepted he's not coming back and they will never work together again, saying this will be the last piece of his, she edits. Let me just take you through some of the key points he makes in this article, his final piece for the Washington Post. He starts off by looking at a review of freedom of press across the Arab world from 2018 from a watchdog called Freedom House. And it says just one country, Tunisia, is the only country considered free in the Arab world. Coming second, Jordan, Morocco and Kuwait. But these are only partly free. Apart from this, he says, Arabs are either misinformed or not informed. They're not able to discuss, let alone publicly discuss, the issues that matter across the region. And he says they're falling prey to false narratives by nationalist governments. And there's a real rallying cry here for the need for Arabs to be able to discuss among themselves. And let me just bring you up again what he goes on to say. And he says, in 2011, there was this great hope. He says that the region was ripe with hope, that journalists would finally be able to break through after the Arab Spring. Since then, though, he says Arab governments have gone on to be able to censor individuals and the media with free rein, saying condemnation on the world stage is often short, followed by silence. Now, this post, this article, this message echoing out at a time when he himself has gone missing. I just want to finally end on one tweet, if I might, from someone who worked with him, Joyce Karam, is a journalist, saying Jamal Khashoggi knew a thing or two about press freedom, saying she knew and she witnessed him being censored, being asked to leave establishments, and that he never backed down. Well, now at a time he seems to have vanished, presumed to have been killed. It is true, they could have silenced him, but now his words, this message, is ringing out around the world. Tessa.
All right, thank you for that, Alex and our team in the Cube. Well, joining me to discuss this, we have Matthew Kawana, the Maltese investigative journalist. We have Laure Briot, policy officer at Transparency International, and Ana Gomes, a Portuguese MEP. Thank you very much for being on the program. Laure, I'll start with you. We're looking at the story of Mr. Khashoggi. As he was saying, there's usually condemnation and then silence. Do you think that this story, which has gotten a lot of condemnation, would it change anything in the way journalists are treated or dissent is treated in countries like Saudi Arabia?
What is very concerning is that this murder is happened due to the work he was doing, and this is something that also happened to Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was actually investigating on golden visa. It's an issue that we've been working on quite extensively, and it's really problematic that the life of journalists are today threatened because of this.
Do these stories change anything? Maybe I'll go to you, Matthew. You've seen this up close. You're the son of Daphne, so you've seen this kind of threat, perhaps, when someone is investigating a sensitive topic. Will the story of your mother, of Mr. Khashoggi, change anything?
Only if people realize that we're at a turning point and things can only go one way or the other. If we decide enough, we have to change everything, then things will go in the right direction. If we do nothing, then they'll get worse for journalists, worse than things already are.
Anna, where do you think this brazen behavior is coming from? From the political classes? Where is this coming from?
Look, I think we need to absolutely condemn and demand the investigation of what has happened with Jamal Khashoggi. But this was happening as a result of the actions of an anti-democratic state, Saudi Arabia. Situations like the mother of Matthew, Daphne Caruana Galizia, happened in the EU. And they're not the only one. After her, we had the killing of Jan Kuciak and partner in Slovakia. We had recently Victoria Martinova in Bulgaria. And the only reason why this goes on is because there is impunity. There is impunity to this day. This week, 1 year passed after Daphne was blown apart. And outrageously, in a EU country where the rule of law should prevail, the investigation is
where
told.
Is it going wrong? Just
and the criminals are free and impunity.
Yes, so who's accountable for that? Where is it going wrong?
Of course, the government of Malta and, of course, the European Union governments who have to indeed demand that a member state in particular would indeed deliver on justice, which has not been the case in Malta.
As you have been saying, as you were mentioning, this week marked the 1 year anniversary of the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, who died in a car bombing in Malta. And she was a well-known investigative journalist. She was dedicated to exposing political corruption, including the so-called golden passport schemes, which you did mention, and which are back in the news again this week. Take a look. Problematic and unfair. That's how EU Justice Commissioner Vera Jourova describes golden passports. Her comments come as the OECD blacklisted 21 countries over the schemes offering nationality at a price. The report flagged 3 European countries, Malta, Monaco, and Cyprus. The Maltese program is particularly popular because it's an EU member. But a report by Transparency International and Global Witness says the problem is more widespread. It names Spain, Hungary, Latvia, Portugal, and the UK, and says each has granted high numbers of golden passports or visas. As for the money earned, since their schemes began, Spain, Cyprus, Portugal, and the UK have each received hundreds of millions of euros on average every year. I mean, this is something we know as journalists, when there's big money involved, the danger increases. So tell us about in Malta, this situation with golden passports. How big really is the network and the problem?
One of the problems is that we don't know. There's absolutely zero transparency. The Maltese government set out right from the beginning to make the scheme as opaque as possible because they understood that this is the selling point. The more opaque it is, the more it protects and obscures the criminal actions of the people who buy passports, the more attractive it is. And the more they're going to sell. We had to fight for even the tiny amount of transparency we have now.
Who is fighting? Who is putting pressure on the government to be less opaque in Malta?
It was my mother. She was the only person. She was the only person investigating the scheme.
So the Maltese people don't care?
I mean, people in general find the scheme unacceptable, but because Malta doesn't have a strong democracy and doesn't have a strong democratic culture, my mother was left alone. Other journalists were slow to understand the scheme, slow to investigate it. It was only my mother, really.
But it was not just because of Malta, because it was also a problem at the European level. I have been here in the European Parliament since 2013, demanding indeed action by the Commission on the golden visa schemes because they are a big threat to our security. They are immoral because, you know, at the same time that they are allowing migrants to sink in Mediterranean, they are given golden pathways to reach migrants, some of them criminals, kleptocrats, who use our jurisdictions to launder money and to eventually even launch all sorts of criminal action. And the Commission was totally oblivious of that until now, finally, and I pay tribute to Commissioner Vera Jourova, who is now undertaking an investigation and is taking measures also because she understood with the case of Malta and what Daphne exposed, not just on golden visas, but also how this interlinks with all sorts of corruption and of even criminal organizations organizing this.
We did hear the warning from security services here in Europe about the dangers. Transparency International, you've done investigations into this.
Our report shows that this is not a marginal phenomenon, as mentioned in the documentary, but also it exposes, like it highlights the risks that that these schemes expose the member state, but the EU as a whole. And one of them is the problem of letting some corrupt people in because little checks, little controls are made
but
on
per se,
applicants.
is it a problem per se? Because there is a financial incentive. And, if you argue from the financial point of view that
drugs will bring you financial results.
So you don't see any benefit to this?
No, of course not. I mean, Europe is supposed to be a union of sophisticated economies, not economies that make their money from pumping oil out of the ground and sitting back doing nothing. This is not what we pride ourselves on. We want our economies to be more sophisticated. This is what economists call rent-seeking economic behavior, where you just create systems.
So what are we what are we calling for moving forward? Are you calling for the European Commission and everyone here to make a decision to say stop it? Stop this scheme?
I mean,
is that what you're calling for?
The European Commission is preparing a report that will allow that. We in the European Parliament, even today, we're discussing here a report that was prepared by the Parliament exactly showing how indeed these schemes are extremely dangerous from the point of view of our security, the integrity of Schengen, the integrity of our economies, and indeed how they lend itself to money laundering and all sorts of criminal activity. And so the Commission has to act. And the very minimum, if these systems are not to be abolished, it's to indeed ensure public scrutiny. In my own country, Portugal, they don't even allow me, a member of the European Parliament, to have access to the lists of 17,000 people that since 2012 were able to get this golden visa.
I mean, certainly this is just the beginning of that discussion because, this is going to get bigger and we'll be keeping an eye on this.